But every product has a different strategy. Every product, before launching every product, there was a detailed marketing strategy was laid down. There were a lot of competitor analysis that were done in detail before launching a product, so that it gives an edge to the existing products in the market to the customers. So marketeers will certainly consider carefully which features are most likely to appeal to its target market, as well as taking into account factors such as lifespan of product and its potential for diversification and development. So as you rightly mentioned, is the base of the product. And if I talk about Square Yards, it's India's largest real estate platform providing end-to-end real estate services. So before I talk about Square Yards as a product, any one of you have heard about Square Yards? Anyone in your family or friends?
Yeah, actually, I have. Hi, Utkarsh. Actually has joined Square Yards and he's about to leave for Dubai in a few days.
Oh,
So
lovely.
I've been keeping in touch with him regarding this thing. I was actually happy and I was talking to him about this, that we actually have a guest lecture from one of the personals from Square Yard.
Okay. So he must be joining sales, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. He's joining sales and he's about to leave in in another week.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Utkarsh. So this is around employment. As a product, anybody has heard about Square Yards? Anything? All right. So let me cover this. So basically, why Square Yards? So that why Square Yards is something that we'll cover in the positioning bit of 7 P's of marketing. But Square Yards is India's largest real estate platform that provides end-to-end real estate services. So when I say end-to-end, that means there are a lot of things that we offer, which we'll cover in the coming slides. There, before launching the product, certainly there was a lot of market analysis that was done. 99 acres is out there in the market. Magic Bricks is out there in the market. So why did we launch this product? Is something that I'll respond in the coming slides. But just to share quick stats with you, we've close to 12 million plus annual traffic on our website. There are 3 million plus user registrations that we've already crossed. An average person is spending more than 3 to 3.5 minutes on our website, browsing through the tools and features. There's a lot of customer acquisition strategy that we work on, and it's a very tactical approach through which we generate close to 70 to 80,000 leads in a month's time. All this is done with the help of research tools that we have on our website, which includes micro market heat maps, algorithmic recommendations and investment scores, price versus size. So to give you a quick summary on how this helps and gives us an edge over the competition is, if you browse 99 acres or Magic Bricks or other portals out there in the market, you just you put in a query for an apartment or a location, and they will give you the results. However, they will not give you detailed analysis of a micro market. So when I say micro market, let's talk about Gurgaon. In Gurgaon, there's a separate location called Golf Course Road. So that becomes a micro market. So if somebody wants to buy something on the Golf Course Road, Square Yards has features wherein people can actually run a detailed study on Golf Course Road as a micro market before investing in the property. Similarly, there are a lot of algorithmic recommendations and investment scores. So before investing in a property, you can do a lot of comparison. I'm sure every one of you would have gone through mobile comparison websites. So similarly, we have a real estate comparison wherein you can compare 4 or 5 different properties and try and understand which one has which feature, and which one do you want to shortlist. Most important feature is price versus size. As in, this is important because this will give you a comparison of the area that you are getting compared to the price that you are paying per square feet. So this kind of detailed analysis and tools are not available on different platforms. That's why this gives us an edge over the competition. There are a lot of other features as well, but these are the prime features that I would wanted to highlight in this session. Anyone, any questions on this slide, or should we move to the next one?
So, what is the differentiator between Square Yards and its competitors? Sir? Does it offer anything very unique to the customers?
Sure, good question. So, apart from the research tools that I just discussed about, these are the tools that you will not find on other competitor websites. That is one. And secondly, apart from real estate as a vertical, we don't just offer real estate. There are a lot of things that we offer along with real estate, which I'll cover in the positioning slide. That will answer your question.
Thanks.
Price, the most important and critical. Obviously, pricing defines everything in today's world. Even our parents, our friends, family members, everybody. Since we've started buying everything online, we make sure that we go to different websites and compare and buy it from where the stuff is available at the cheapest cost. Be it 50 rupees, be it 100 rupees. The customer loyalty is as such has gone for a toss. It's all about saving 50 rupees or 100 rupees, unless you are getting something additional from Amazon or maybe any other e-commerce website. See how it has grown over our minds. I ended up taking Amazon as a reference. So price does not only determines the amount of profit the business will make, but it also affects the value of the product as perceived by the customer. And as I mentioned, customers always do a price comparison before buying a product. At Square Yards, this will give you a bit of a shock. It's absolutely free. We don't charge anything to the customer. So this is our main USP. How we survive and how we sustain our operations is primarily we get our brokerages from the developers. If a customer puts in an inquiry and would like to invest in a property through Square Yards, we'll not charge them any money for that. If you compare it with a local broker, if you reach out to them, certainly they will say ki itna percentage mein mera lagega. This is something that I'll get, but that's not the case with us. We provide the services absolutely free of cost. Anybody can look out for the property on squareyards.com, and our sales representative gets in touch with them and provides them with a detailed study on the property. That all comes at free of cost. There's absolutely nothing that we charge.
Sir, apart from this zero brokerage, what for your product it is important, but if for some other product the price may differ also. So what kind of price differences?
So see, as a Square as a company as a whole does not charge brokerage at all. If you are referring to pricing of a product, to give you an example, let's say there's a property called Godrej Nature Plaza in Gurgaon, right? So there's a pricing. Everybody, if you go to 99 acres, there'll be a different pricing. If you go to Magic Bricks, there'll be a different pricing. If you go to Square, there'll be a slightly different pricing. So it all depends on the kind of arrangement that you have with the developer. If you want to sell 50 units, they will give you a better pricing. If you tell them that we'll sell 150 units, they will give you even better pricing. The more the units, the better the pricing, and that's how you get an edge in the market to sell your product. So I think it all depends on the arrangements, and we at Square Yards, what we do is we try and sign up mandates with the developers. When I say mandates, is something that basically you promise the developer that these are the number of units that will sell in X amount of days or months. So when you sign it in bulk, you get a much competitive pricing. So that's how we get into the arrangement with the developers, which again gives us an edge on the pricing factor compared to the market.
Yeah, sir, I have a question, sir.
Sure.
Most of the companies adopt the strategy of keeping the prices low to have an edge over the competitor. right? But
Correct.
then there's a company called Bangal Cement. Their tagline is "Sasta nahi sabse acha." So don't you think it is confusing to the customer?
I'm sorry. What's the name of the company?
Bangal Cement.
Acha, Banga Cement you're referring to. See, the quality ultimately matters. If you want to give something, so I'll take a classic example of e-commerce website. You would have seen a lot of deals wherein pricing, the MRP is quoted at 3,000 rupees, whereas the product is available for 99 rupees, right? But you know the kind of quality that the product will come with. So certainly, today's customer is pretty intelligent. You cannot fool them. It's an interesting tagline, might catch eyeballs, might grab a lot of attention. But as I mentioned, the customer always does their bit researching about the product before investing in the product. So that's something that goes without saying. Especially in last 6 months, the mindset has taken a paradigm shift. People who did not want to, kind of study real estate online, people have started doing that. With that mindset, kya tha? The mindset was that no, I won't invest in the property unless I go and see it in person. That's what we do, right? That's what our parents did. That's what our families did. That no, we cannot invest unless we'll go and see the property in person. But that changed in the last 3-4 months. So what you're saying is, Nitin, to answer your question, sasta nahi sabse acha, it makes an impact, but the basic human psychology is, if I want to invest in Nature Plus and if I'm getting it a lakh rupees cheaper from Square Yards, and if everything ticks my requirements, I would still go ahead and buy the property from Square Yards. Yes, but if somebody, a local broker who does not have any background, I don't know about them, or I might not trust them. But something which is available online, and if the company comes with a lot of credibility, I'll certainly go with them. Any other questions on this slide?
Yes, sir. I have one doubt.
Sure.
Yeah. Some days back, I was viewing an interview of Mr. Amit Kumar Agarwal, who is the CEO of No Broker. So their positioning is that there is no broker in their deal. But when I visited your website, I found that you are dealing with agents. So do you feel that no broker is getting an extra edge as there is no brokers in their functioning?
So that's a very good question, Tushar. So to tackle No Broker, so No Broker has a completely different arrangement. I mean, so Square Yards has different verticals. One is Square Yards, which deals with end-to-end properties in real estate. Whereas we also have one vertical which is called Square Connect, which deals primarily through brokers. So I'm sure that you would have gone through Square Connect, which basically is our B2B model. I'll come to that again. It will be covered in the positioning slide because I've highlighted all the verticals that Square Yards as a group of companies basically has. So that will answer your question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Promotion, umbrella term covering all the media through which a business informs customers about their product. I think most of you would agree that irrespective of the COVID impact, a lot of companies have started doing their promotions on digital mediums compared to conventional mediums like TV or print or offline flyers, events. How many of you would like to disagree on that? Do you think digital gives an edge over traditional form of marketing?
Certainly not, sir. Certainly not.
Certainly not.
Yeah, it does, but you need to guard against fraud, digital fraud, which is happening.
Gives an edge, but not every time, because sometimes word of mouth plays a very important role. So that is a form of traditional promotion that is still in still in use?
So word of mouth can also happen through influencer marketing campaigns. So influencer marketing campaigns, what exactly happens in influencer marketing? So I think it's all about mindset. If you ask our parents, I think everything used to come in newspaper. Agar ek full page print ad aa gaya, so everybody thinks, oh yeah, this is awesome. Yeah, the brand has kind of taken the entire page and is talking about the brand. But now things have slightly changed and evolving day by day. When I say influencer marketing is looping in celebrities and tell them to talk about your brands. If any one of you follows Sachin Tendulkar or maybe Ranveer Singh on Instagram, you will see a lot of brand associations on his Instagram handle. He's doing a lot of promotions. Recently, he did with Nike. He also did it with Head and Shoulders. So in a day's time, in 24 hours, the number of views on that particular post, they run in millions. And the kind of followers that these guys have, it will give you much higher reach. And the best part is, at least the users or the customers who have visited their website, you can ask for the data and retarget them for your other products, which is not possible in the case of traditional mediums. Yes, I think others were also saying something. Please go ahead.
Sir, I just want to ask one question like that came into my mind. So when it comes to promotion, how effective is it to promote false promotion to a rivalry product, and that will create a positive impact on our product? For example, the United States election, there were like a lot of false accusations on Hillary Clinton. That ultimately led to the victory of Donald Trump. So, how do you see this as a strategy or?
So this strategy, that's a pretty intelligent question. So this strategy basically is done by a lot of clients. In fact, that's why you need to have your ORM in place. So ORM basically is a completely different vertical which comes under social media. ORM is basically online reputation management. There could be two different ways. I mean, one could talk negatively about you through word of mouth. But as I mentioned, the customer is intelligent enough to come back to online. They'll come back online. They'll look for you. They'll search for you, and at that time the ORM kicks in. So basically, the responsibility of the ORM team is to make sure that whenever you have legitimate customers who are happy with you, you make sure that they leave positive Google reviews, they leave positive Facebook reviews. They talk about, they leave positive testimonials for you. I mean, to tackle this, you can also run, positive testimonial, customer testimonial campaigns. So to give you an example, we recently did a campaign in Australia because we have a team in Australia. The entire objective of the campaign was to drive, trustworthiness in the brand, because it's a new brand which is getting established in the international market. We got amazing, click-through rates, and people, when they came to the website, they absolutely were, fascinated by the kind of tools that we have. So it happens all the time. I mean, the competitor will certainly, when they don't have a edge on the product as compared to yours, they will certainly try and bring down your product by pushing negative reviews or signing up with dummy accounts and posting negative testimonials. This is something that happens all the time, and that's why it's very important to have an online reputation management team, which is a part of a social media team, which takes care of all these issues. So digital as a global media plan goes by, I think typically we spend more on Google and Facebook. It's covered in social nowadays. Instagram is also something which is widely accepted. There's a lot of media buying being done on Times of India, websites like Times of India, Economic Times, Money Control. You can ask these guys to tweak your campaigns to show only to HNI crowds. There are a lot of portals out there where you can do listings. There are marketing platforms like Columbia and Taboola. So a lot of new avenues have come in where you can do market your product. And at times, I think, as Ahmad earlier mentioned, when you need sudden burst in share of voice, it's not a bad idea to take a full front page ad of a leading newspaper. It will certainly give you a much higher visibility. We have done that in the past. We recently did 6 back-to-back print campaigns, and the kind of searches of Square Yards as a brand name increased considerably overnight. So offline mediums, I think most of you are aware. It's events, it's society activations, corporate activations. You can also do flyers, pamphlets, newspaper insertions, hoardings, TV print. So anyone so far got a chance to run their campaign on digital? Anyone of you who's explored that?
So we do have a social media team that actively takes part in activities like that.
Okay. And
Actually, sir, yes, as part of our media team, we do run campaigns on several events. And also during our undergraduate college, we also did such social media campaigning on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay, and these are paid campaigns you're talking about?
No, sir, we haven't been.
Sir, I have been part of Decathlon where I did campaigning for the relocating of store in 2019. So that I was part of social media.
Okay. So yes, Facebook is it's pretty easy when it comes to running a campaign. And again, there are two bits of it. I think one is organic, where you can just post things online and organic engagement comes in, and the other part, which is the most important bit these days, is the paid media. Running a campaign is not a problem. I think I can vouch for it. Everybody who is present on this class can certainly try it out, spend 1,000 rupees and understand the kind of steps which are involved in setting up a campaign. Everybody can run the campaigns. It's not difficult to run campaigns. Even the Google AdWords console, which was complicated 5 years back, has now been completely re-evolved. The user interface has entirely changed, and they've made it much easier. The critical bit of digital campaigns is the optimization part. Optimization is basically the process of figuring out what is working for you and what is not working for you. That is the most important bit of running any campaign. And that's why digital gives you an edge over traditional medium, because you can track everything on digital medium, whereas it's very difficult to track numbers on offline mediums.
To ask a question.
Sure.
Sir, like Square Yards is a measurement unit too. So does it affect the SEO, I mean penetration and other things of the website?
That's a great question, Pulkit. It had been one of our major challenges. Being a unit of measurement, it did impact us. In fact, there are more searches on Square Yards as a unit of measurement compared to a brand. If you talk about globally, in India, we have been able to tackle this problem with paid ads and organic searches. There's a lot of SEO work that is being done by team on a daily basis. There are a lot of backlinkings that we are doing. There are a lot of partnerships that we are tying up with different bloggers to exchange backlinks. So basically, once you start doing these activities, and the more your product gets evolved, gets all the tick marks from Google search engine algorithms, you eventually start taking over these problems, and that's how we basically tackled it. But it was a problem. It was a problem which we had to face earlier.
Sir, just a question on digital marketing campaigns. When I was working in a financial services organization before, we found it very difficult to measure the effectiveness of digital marketing campaigns. So I was just asking, like, when you run a campaign, how do you measure its effectiveness normally?
Okay, so this comes under the optimization bit. So what you'll have to make sure, Deepak, is to make sure that everything that you are running on the campaign is being tracked. So you need to capture the top funnel as well as the bottom funnel. So everyone understands funnels in digital marketing. Okay, so let me give you a quick background on what exactly is a funnel. So when I run a campaign, let's say I've run a campaign for Nature Plus as a property on Facebook. Okay, now people who are just looking at the ad and they are not clicking on it, this is my top funnel. As in people who are just looking at it, browsing through their timelines. They saw the ad on their Facebook page and they just scrolled through it. That's my top funnel. And somebody who clicks on the ad and shares their information like name, username, phone number, country, city, and they share the lead with us. That's my bottom funnel. Okay. Now it's very important to capture the top funnel as well as the bottom funnel, because people who have seen your ad and they clicked on it but they did not fill in the lead is also important to me. So it's very important that I capture that data separately. I should capture the data of leads which have already been submitted separately, and people who basically did not click on the ad at all. I mean, there are a couple of platforms who also show you data on people who just served the impression but they did not click on the ad. Now it's important to track each of these customers in different buckets, in separate buckets, so that the most bottommost funnel is the person who's already filled in the lead. So what you will do is you'll pass on the lead to the salesperson. They will give them a call and they will figure out ki lead ka kya hua. If the lead is good, if the prospect is hot, they will pitch a product to the client, and that's it. That's the end of the story. And then you, again, once the transaction is closed, you make sure that you keep a tab on that customer, because in verticals like e-commerce, there are a lot of repeat purchase which happens, unless real estate. So if a person has bought a mobile today, certainly you want to show them a fancy charger after 100 days. They might buy it. You want to show them a fancy mobile cover after 100 days, they will buy it. So there's a lot of upsell that happens on e-commerce, contrary to real estate. Real estate does not happen. Most of the families in India, they buy real estate once in a lifetime. There's no repeat purchase as such. But e-commerce give you a lot of permutations and combinations to remarket your product. And that's why it becomes more important in e-commerce and other small ticket size websites, that you capture all these customer details in different buckets. Now, coming to the question of, once you have these in different buckets, it's important to kind of marry it with your internal CRM. So when I say internal CRM, you capture the lead from Facebook, but now the Facebook will not show you whether the prospect is hot or warm or cold. You'll have to integrate it with your internal CRM. That CRM could be Salesforce, that CRM could be Lead Magnet, it could be Oracle, it could be anything. But it's important that what you are doing on ground is again passed on to the Facebook ad. So what I'll do as a marketeer is I'll run a campaign. If I have captured 100 leads, and if there are 30 leads which are hot prospects, I'll put them in a different bucket. If there are 50 leads which are cold, I'll put them in a different bucket. And if there are 10 leads which are junk, I'll put them in different buckets. What I need to do is to optimize it further is I'll push back this data again in Facebook campaign. A lot of people and a lot of companies don't do this, and that's why they don't, their campaigns do not give them efficient results. It's very important to, pass this data back to any ad platform, be it Google, be it Facebook, be it, content marketing channels like Taboola or Columbia. Until and unless if you don't feed them back with the data, you will not get the required desired results. It's very important to do this. So I think this is where most of the organizations are feeling when they say that my digital campaigns are not working, because this is something that they are missing out on. So this is a very detailed topic. We can certainly cover this maybe in one of the if I get a chance, we'll cover it in future sessions. But yeah, this is to answer your question.
Sir, may I ask one question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Sir, we know the definition of bounce rate, and then the leads are become converted customers, but we don't know the statistics. So I really want to know how are the statistics of those? How is the bounce rate, and how many people are finally converted as customers? Can you please share some insights on that?
Sure. So see, bounce rate is something that, I mean, if you, there are a lot of websites where you can see a bounce rate as high as 80%. So 80-90% is alarming. But anything which is in the vicinity of 50 to 60% is absolutely fine. I mean, it's a human nature, right? If you click on something, I mean, in today's date, if you're browsing something on mobile, if I open ndtv.com, because not everyone has apps installed on their mobile. If you want to run through a mobile page, if you open it, the screen is flooded with a lot of ads, and you end up clicking on banners because the screen is small, and you are browsing, you are navigating, you always end up clicking there. And accidental clicks are basically increasing day by day because media buying online is also increasing day by day, and that's why bounce rates are also increasing across the websites. So people actually, all the marketeers, they do not worry till the bounce rate is in the vicinity of 50 to 60%. It's always good to have less than it's good to have bounce rate in the vicinity of 30 to 40%. But even if it's around 50, 55, 60%, it's okay because this primarily happens due to accidental clicks. Now, how many of them turn into customers is something wherein, Tushar, my previous discussion comes into the picture. You will have to make sure that you are tracking things. If you don't track each and every customer who is coming onto your website, you will not be able to understand who is your customer. Now, again, there are two bits to it. Every customer that comes to your website might not necessarily fill in the lead. Right. So in that case, you need to track them via cookies, and that is a product development. So if I want to track a user's behavior, if I want to track whether this person has visited my website or not, I need to make sure that my website or my product is configured to track cookies of that person. So that if the person comes again and again on a repetitive basis in a week's time or in 15 days, I will get a clear indication that this person is pretty interested. And then I'll start my marketing campaigns around that. I'll make sure that I bombard the person with SMS, I'll bombard the person with Facebook, Google Ads, with emailers, with whatever possible. So that, because I know that the conversion rates or the chances of conversions are pretty high.
Thank you, sir.
Should we move on?
Yes, sir. And if you want, you can limit the questions to 2 or 3 from the next slide, sir, if it's taking up a lot of your time.
No, that's fine. I have my, I have a couple of hours for you guys, so absolutely not a problem.
Sure thing, sir.
Place, I think this has been redefined in the last 3-4 months, and the global marketing strategy will change. Somebody was asking me, what has been the, reason behind a paradigm shift in real estate from offline to online. I said COVID. COVID made us did it, otherwise we were not doing it. And I think that's the case with most of the traditional organizations. And this last couple of months put us in such a situation that there was no other way. You had to innovate. You had to make sure that the entire team, be it the tech team, be it the marketing team, be it the sales team, adapts to the new form of online meetings and virtual tours, and a lot of things have been done in the last 3-4 months. I'll cover this in the next topic. But as I mentioned earlier, the products were sold in shops or door-to-door, online, so on and so forth. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of organizations will now move to 100% digital because digital is the future. Ours, as in real estate, it's basically a hybrid model wherein the journey starts online and it ends offline because there are a lot of customers who still ask for a physical site visit before investing in the property. To give an example, if Tushar basically fills in the lead online on Facebook, the conversion did not happen online. The customer always wanted to kind of see the property in person before investing. Now, how it has changed in the last 3-4 months is there are a lot of AI tools that have come in. There are a lot of 3D and virtual tools which have come in, which basically shows a 360-degree view of the property and the vicinities. There are a lot of drone tours which are available. In India, it's still a challenge because you need to take permission from local police station to do a drone shoot. International markets, that's not a challenge. Dubai is one of the biggest market, and there are so fancy tools available that I would always want to buy property sitting at home, looking at the drone tours. I would not want to go to a physical site visit before making the investment. So that has changed a lot for us. I'm sure it will impact other markets as well. In fact, I was reading Amazon got the approval to deliver products via drone in the US. They've already started that. I think this was in the news last week. So that answers the question in itself. I think place is something that will change dynamically in the coming years. So place this also basically kind of defines where you target your potential customers. So Square Yards does not only serve India as a market, we also serve a lot of international locations, primarily being Gulf. And as I mentioned earlier, we've also started with Melbourne and Sydney, Brisbane, and in the US, in the Canada, Ontario as a location. So these are the locations that we serve online. We generate leads online, we target potential customers online, and our local sales team based in those locations, they basically help the customers with their investment queries. Questions on this, if any?
How do you manage a sales team in such diverse locations? I mean, normally, like they have because it's such a huge footprint you have. So
correct. So what we've done is the marketing team is a centralized marketing team. So if you look at my profile, it's a global marketing head. So I manage all the marketing activities in these locations. There's a centralized marketing team that sits in Gurgaon, and they manage campaigns of these locations. By the entire campaign configuration happens locally. We get on frequent calls with the sales leaders on the product, on the optimization bit, and every region has a different leader. So Dubai has a different sales leader. Abu Dhabi as a location has a different sales leader. Bahrain, Qatar, Oman, Melbourne. Every country has a different sales leader. Under them, they have defined managers, and again, managers will have FOS, which is basically feet on street. Basically, that's the term that we use internally. Who will go out and meet the customers. So how we are managing it is through a proper hierarchy, which basically makes sure that everything is managed efficiently. All the leads that are being generated are delivered to our sales team through internal CRMs. And every sales leader is responsible to drive their region. I mean, that's why there are weekly calls, monthly calls. There are quarterly business reviews that make sure that the numbers are in place. And as I mentioned, after earlier we used to do voice calls, but now since last couple of months we have only been doing Zoom calls or WebEx, and so it has completely changed for us. So it's become much easier to manage somebody who's sitting in Brisbane, and earlier I had to travel in order to kind of discuss things in details with the sales team. But now it's just a click away. I just define a time slot and jump on a call with the sales team.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, moving on to the packaging bit. This is where we'll cover the different verticals of Square Yards. So basically, packaging refers to the way a product is wrapped, also its overall presentation. That's to do more with e-commerce website or other online websites, wherein once you get the delivery, how it is basically delivered to the customer. The packaging also matters. But in our case, that's not the case. The product itself is virtual. What we are delivering to the end customer is real estate. So these are our, I would say that this is the packaging that we offer to the customer, because the end product is real estate. As I mentioned, it's zero brokerage. We try and give lowest price guarantee. There's an in-house mortgage at competitive rates. There's also a feature to rental and resale listings on website. There's a live booking engine to book your inventory online. There's a price comparison feature. You get dedicated account manager to manage your investment portfolio. So these are the things combined which gives us an edge over the competition. So a couple of you had asked a similar question at the starting of the presentation. So these are the things which gives us an edge over to competitors out there in the market. So how we are different than different real estate companies in the market is because you will not find any other real estate company basically which gives you all these features at one go. So apart from real estate, will also give you an in-house mortgage. There's also a rental and resale feature. You can also book your inventories online. You can always compare your product that you are interested in before making an investment. And plus, there's a dedicated account manager to manage your portfolio. So this is the packaging that we offer to the end customer, which gives us a niche placement in the market compared to all the players out there. Questions on this, please?
So which one among this would you define your USP? I mean, the one tracking most customers.
See, zero brokerage basically certainly is something that seeing as a lot of players out there in the market have started coming up with. We also don't charge brokerage. That was our, when we launched, this was our primary USP. But I think in today's date, I think lowest price guarantee is what we are playing on, and this basically has helped us acquire a lot of customers at cost-effective rates. So this is my USP at the moment. And how do we do it? As I mentioned earlier, we get into an arrangement with the developer wherein we tell them that yes, we'll try and sell X number of units in X number of days, and accordingly, the bigger the arrangement, the better the price that we get. So if I'm selling an X property and if I give a commitment of a bigger volume, certainly the pricing of the property would be comparatively lower, will be offered at a lower cost. It won't be a significant difference, but it still will be at a lower cost, which basically inclines the customer to buy a property from Square Yards. Okay, moving on to the next most important piece of marketing is positioning. Basically refers to product status in relation to wider market, how it lines up against competitors. So if you refer to the first slide wherein we mentioned that end-to-end marketplace is because we have squarearts.com, we have Square Connect, we have Square Capital, and we have Square Elite. So this package creates a niche position for Square Arts in the world of real estate. Now I'll quickly give you a brief on each of the vertical. Square Arts, basically, I've already spoken about. Square Connect is the B2B vertical, wherein basically it's a mortgage. It's a broker marketplace wherein we have onboarded a lot of local brokers who basically work with us to sell the product that we want to sell in the market. So Square Arts is B2C and Square Connect is B2B. Square Capital is the mortgage vertical. So if a customer is interested in buying a house, they can also we also offer in-house mortgage. So you don't have to reach out to a bank for your mortgage or loan requirements. We have tied up with all the banks, major banks out there in the market. We offer mortgage at competitive rates. And Square Elite is basically, as the name suggests, Elite is targeted to HNI audience who basically would like to invest in a property worth 5 crore or more. Why did we come up with this vertical? To give you a classic example, if you visit a Maruti showroom and the kind of salesperson that you encounter there versus if you visit a Audi or BMW showroom and the kind of experience you have there, there's a huge difference. The kind of the way the salesperson pitches you for the car or explains you the features of the product, there's a huge difference, and that's why we thought that there's a need to kind of come up with a separate vertical. So that's Square Elite. So basically, for anything and everything around real estate, the customer can just come to Square Arts and we'll make sure that everything is taken care of in-house. We also provide services like, so there's a dedicated CRM team of 100 people who basically manage all my existing clients. What they will do is, if they are my account manager and if I'm sitting in Dubai, they'll also be happy to arrange an Aadhaar card for me. So that's the extent that we've gone to, so that the customer does not have to visit physically in order to make an investment. Questions on this? I'm sure there will be a couple of. Should we move on?
Yeah, sure, sir.
Sure, sir.
Last but not the least, people, the final P of marketing. Basically, develop the habit of thinking in terms of people inside and outside of your business who are responsible for every element of the sales, marketing, and overall activities. So basically, people does not mean that you are only talking about the potential customers. It also basically includes your workforce. I mean, typically, I think in different Ps, I think they will always refer to the potential customer as people, but I would also kind of would like to include our existing workforce because they play a very important role in executing things. So it's basically people who carry out your executions and potential customers who are out there in the market who invest in your properties. So very important to define this, and specifically for digital campaigns, because without accurate customer profiling, every other formula of 7 Ps of marketing will fail. If you are, to give you a classic example, if you are not reaching out to an audience, a relevant audience who can invest in a property of 2 to 5 CR, the customer will never convert. You will never ever have conversion rate on your marketing campaigns. So very important to define the right age bracket, the right geo targeting, the income brackets, the gender, or there can be multiple buckets on this. As I mentioned earlier, that we need to start capturing data, each and every bit of it, so that we get better segmentation of customers. So this basically defines the overall efficiency of your campaigns. Any questions here? Moving on to the next slide. So now, what's the relevance of 7 P's of marketing? Corporate social responsibility. Anyone would like to talk on this before we start? Okay, so basically, what's the relevance of 7 P's of marketing in corporate, in CSR? So basically, it's the commitment by businesses to behave ethically and strike a right balance between profits and society at large. So, and this certainly is applicable on organizations which have a threshold revenue of some extent. I think the numbers would have changed by now. I don't remember the exact number, but it's not applicable in all the organizations. But all the popular ones like Cokes and Nikes and Reeboks and Hindustan Unilever and all these companies of the world, they will certainly fall into this bucket. Very important to kind of balance out the profits and kind of also consider society at large. You should not only think about making profits. It's very important to kind of balance it with different initiatives, because it ultimately improves the goodwill and reputation of the company. And I would also say that this is also one of a brilliant form of marketing. It helps you somewhere with word of mouth, because if you see something which is promotional in nature, if you are shown a sponsored ad, you might still want to kind of skip it. But something which basically is of CSR in nature and something which basically enhances the society or environment, you will end up looking at the ad. You will end up looking at such marketing material. You will consume that. There are a lot of videos which are being circulated on WhatsApp and different other mediums. Those videos, you will see that those are a bit emotional in nature, or they have something which basically talks about giving back to the society, which talks about about donations and charities, about initiatives, green initiatives, building schools and houses in rural areas. So this is very important, I think, for any organizations who have reached a certain stage.
Sir, is it necessary to involve in CSR in the field that is working only, or we can go in other fields also?
I lost you there. Can you come up with the question again?
My question is that, is it necessary, like most companies get involved in CSR in their own field only? Like you are in brokerage, so you get involved into real estate or schools, or other fields also.
See, it's not mandatory. It's not mandatory, but it's very important. I mean, once you become so large, so that you become a part and parcel of everybody's lives. I mean, to give you an example of Colgate as a toothpaste, right? Everybody refers to it as Colgate. I mean, nobody says ki close up, they say Colgate de do, right? So once it becomes a routine, a part of your day-to-day routine, it's very important that you do something by giving it back to the society. I mean, if you talk about us, certainly we have the goals and ambitions to become a part of the daily lives of the end consumer or potential customers. We have not reached that stage yet, but certainly we would like to do something around. I would say that we would like to boost PMAY, which is Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, basically, which helps underprivileged or people who have less buying capacity to kind of get a dream home of their own. That could be the form of initiatives, CSR initiatives from our end. But we have not, having said that, we have not reached that stage, but something that would certainly like to do in the future. So how companies are doing it? These are some brilliant CSR examples that I've quoted. For instance, Johnson & Johnson, they are pretty known for their green initiatives. Google, after Sundar Pichai specifically, they promised that they consume 50% less energy compared to all other IT firms are there. Coke basically has reduced carbon footprint by tweaking their supply chain. Netflix, this basically also happened with Spotify and Zomato. They basically recently announced that they give up to paid parental leaves of up to 52 weeks. Lego basically is addressing climate change. Starbucks is giving more and more opportunities to hire younger people. I'm sure people who visited Starbucks, you would see that there are mostly younger crowds out there. I mean, you will hardly see anybody who is aged. So that's how they are giving back to the society. I mean, Tatas are anyways known to kind of give it back to the society. They have been a brilliant example as an organization. But these are some CSR examples, and why it is important is because everybody is doing in-the-face marketing. Everybody is doing promotions. Everybody is putting in marketing dollars to say that no, my product is better than compared to the rest of the market. But no, there are a very few who also take these initiatives. And trust me, these kind of efforts will also basically somehow will help with a share of voice and word of mouth marketing. I mean, person who has been recently hired at Starbucks will certainly go back and tell 100 of his friends that yeah, make Starbucks mein job de diya. I mean, but you will not do it for a person, or an organization who basically rejected you just because you are younger. So it helps somewhere. Any form of the 7 P's of marketing that we spoke about will certainly help somewhere once you have become, as big as Tatas and folks of the world. Any question here?
Yes, sir. So, sir, this parental leave, which you have said that Netflix and Spotify and Zomato,
Sure.
is it really comes under CSR? Because I thought that this is HR policies.
Advait, there's a thin line between HR policy and CSR. So basically, it does come under HR policy. But if you once the session is over, I'll share a couple of links with you where it was basically also considered as a CSR activity. There were a couple of links which were out there in the market. Basically, in spite of being a HR policy, it was consumed by the end user as a CSR policy because it impacted their personal life somewhere. I mean, if my wife is working and if there's a scenario wherein I would want to take 52 weeks of parental leaves and they're to paid leaves, it will impact my life to a great extent. I mean, imagine somebody who's blessed with a baby, and after a week's time or 10 days time, they have to again go back to work. Right? So that impacts the lives. I mean, there's a thin line, as I mentioned. I mean, if my organization tells me that, okay, from today onwards, your team will get 10 more leaves on an annual basis, that will certainly fall under HR policy, because it's not a life-changing decision. It's not impacting it in a way that my life will be changed. But yes, this policy, it was implemented globally and it did impact the lives of the people. And that's why, it kind of fell under CSR as well. All right, moving to the most important, the most hot topic, which is the most talked about topics out there in the market, is the post-COVID marketing strategy. So before we start this topic, I would like to understand from you how it has changed the world for you. I mean, let's forget marketing. Personally, it would have changed something for you. Can few of you share examples and how it has changed it for you?
So people have become more self-prone to hygiene and cleanliness. People have become more sensitive towards that from pre-COVID era.
Okay. What else?
The other thing, we are attending a seminar in like this way. I think it was not the case if we were in the campus. And besides that, we are not really sure about at last if we are going to visit our campus in 2 years or not.
Okay. What else? I mean, these are there are both obvious ones as well. I mean, to give an example, I've stopped stepping out. Anything that I want to order, I order online.
Same
Any
here.
any
Yes,
such
sir.
example?
Spending patterns have totally changed actually. Like some things that were not ordered earlier are we now are ordering them online. Like we are buying health equipments and all that for our home, and all. Spending at restaurants or eating out have drastically dropped.
Okay. How many of you or your family stopped mates at home when it started? I think most of us, right?
Yeah.
No, we didn't.
I think one more thing which has happened because of COVID is that the e-commerce, like the shopping, like you said, of from home, the digital platform has increased significantly more. Like I was like the Amazon shares
Correct.
shot up to the roof in COVID.
Absolutely. Amazon shares, you talk about Zoom. I mean, nobody knew Zoom. Now look at the shares. So I think everything and everything, I think it has impacted the lives of everyone, including our parents. I mean, it's a relevant example because again, we used to see this in real estate and then in buying grocery as well. I mean, people used to refrain from buying vegetables online. But now after this, I think most of us in Gurgaon, they've started, they've installed all these apps. Even though, there were a couple of apps earlier, but I think their volumes have gone up tremendously. People are trying to make sure that they don't step out and they try and order everything online. I think this is the major change that has come in.
I also think that said that after demonetization, like how these virtual paying apps, like they shot, I think it also, of most of the transactions turned digital. I think it should be the opinion that I think the
Absolutely.
plastic currency or that part.
Absolutely. Paytms have gone, Google Pays and Paytms utilization has gone up, plastic money has gone up. Absolutely. So basically, I'll talk about real estate, how it basically changed for us. So the day that lockdown was announced, we were thinking that how will it function, because we being a hybrid model, as in the customer originates online and the transaction used to happen offline. I mean, in 90% of the cases, the transaction did not happen unless the customer visited the property on offline. So we had to, overnight think over the strategy and then what should we do, how should we go about it. So I think all of us sat down and brainstormed and kind of figured out what all touch points do we need to kind of fix so that the transactions or the the lead flows and the conversions do not impact. Overnight, we came up with a lot of 3D walkthroughs and virtual tours of the properties. We came up with online booking engine. Earlier, this booking used to happen via physical forms, wherein you fill in all the details and pass it back to the developer. This happened online. Video calls increased. I think WebEx, Zoom, Skype. I think everything went up by 300%. We came up with a on-the-move app. So there are a lot of marketing collaterals, so like digital banners that we make for Facebook and Google. Apart from that, we also work on multiple reports, so which gives you a potential customer or micro market analysis. We came up with an app so that it becomes easier for the salesperson to share the marketing collaterals on the move rather than sharing a physical copy. Earlier, we used to take printouts of a lot of marketing collaterals, but then that completely stopped. We also came up with digital signatures so that the person who is sitting in a different country or maybe an NRI investor, they can also continue to transact, and that also included basically local people. Then all these things combined made sure that the overall transaction flow is not impacted, and the momentum continues as it is. So these are these things we had to change overnight. team worked day and night to come up with these features and for a couple of weeks. Once we were ready with the infrastructure, then we reached out to all these developers and told them that this is what we have, and which helped us grab a couple of mandate partnerships with developers like Godrej Properties, Shapoorji, Shriram Properties, Signature Global. So these are just developers, pretty good developers out there in the market who helped us with mandates. Mandates is basically a partnership arrangement between a developer and a broker like Square Yards, wherein we give them a commitment that will sell X number of units for them in this period. And at the same time, I think marketing had to work with 300% more efficiency with razor-sharp targeting and optimization to acquire leads at low CPLs. When most of the world had gone silent and they were not promoting anything, they were not doing any sort of digital marketing, we started it. We thought that will continue because the tools enabling tools that we had come up with built that confidence internally and for the end customers as well, that we continue doing that. And with above changes, Square Yards was able to capture 20% market share of Indian real estate during lockdown. This is between April to June. We sold 700 CR worth property, close to 500 units of mortgage properties. This is what we were able to achieve with the above tools. So it was a 360-degree change. I mean, there were sleepless nights and a lot of work that went into this, but happy that it finally worked. And what we feel is, I think this is going to stay back, irrespective whether the vaccination comes in and irrespective that the world goes back to normalcy again. What we feel is the changes that we've got in the last 6 months will stay. I mean, person who is so if I have to give you an example, earlier I had to waste my entire day if I have to meet somebody in Noida because it's a 2 hours drive one side. I'll make sure that I'll not step out of the office now. I'll set up the meeting online and we'll save on that time. So I think this way, I think a lot of things changed. The world became a smaller place. I think and everything was available on click of a button. So this is the overall summary.
So how the rental rates going down in some of the cities that have been like deserted because of COVID-19? Like now, it was mostly the service force that were working or living over there, and now it has been. How are the rental rates will be affecting your revenue and all that?
So rental is not the primary source of revenue for us. What we do is primarily we deal in end-to-end properties and buying a new property. Rentals is a very small chunk for us. So as such, it has not impacted our revenue. But yes, you are right. There are a lot of people who have basically left the rented apartments, and because most of the organizations are shut till December, I think everybody thought that why not save on this money and then work from home. So that has impacted, but I think that has it has already started recovering. A lot of offices in Gurgaon also have started opening up, barring few bigger ones like Google and Facebook. I think they have announced, and a couple of offices in Cybersecurity where they have announced that the lockdown, that they will continue to work from home till December. But apart from that, I think most of the companies have started working.
I was talking to one of my cousin who was working in Gurgaon, but now is at home in home. But he was talking that their companies have figured out that their productivity has actually shot up during the lockdown. So I think they won't be getting to office really early. So that will be like impacting. Like if a person is living in Gurgaon, he will be looking for buying a property, and if he is living in some other city, then he may not be looking for that opportunity.
You are right to an extent, but I would slightly also disagree to an extent, Sachin, because see, it all depends on the kind of organization that you are working with and the kind of vertical that you are working on. Because my team's productivity went up. We used to start early in the morning at 9. The call which used to happen at 10:30 in the day used to start at 9 a.m. in the morning, and people used to work till 8:30, which does not happen, because if people are coming from, let's say, Delhi, the Delhi Metro basically ends up taking their 3-4 hours of their day. The time that used to go in commute, they used to put in productivity, and certainly the productivity increased. But for a hybrid model like real estate, and wherein again in real estate, I think 80% of the workforce is sales team. So is it possible for sales team to continue with the same productivity by working online? Yes, it has certainly improved, but is it adapted by each and every customer? Is it adapted by each and every salesperson? The answer is no. For organizations like Google and Facebook, yes, everything has to be online because it's all tech enabled. They are all 100% tech enabled companies, and they can continue working from home. For instance, Twitter announced that they have given it a permanent work from home solution to their employees. They can continue working from home throughout their lives, but might not be possible for all the business models out there. So I think eventually people will understand the importance of moving things online, moving stuff online, moving technology online. But not all business models are prepared for it. They might take 6 more months to kind of adapt to the change, and then eventually reach there.
Okay, thank you, sir.
A couple of you, I think I wanted to cover this topic as well. So I'm not an expert in travel or tourism as an industry, but these are the obvious pointers that I could think of, which will impact the travel and tourism industry. Certainly, the business travel will decrease considerably. As I mentioned, everything will move online. People will start meeting on Zoom, video calls, video conferencing. Events will go on standby for some time, and all the conferences, exhibitions, and different types of get-togethers will certainly will be put on hold. As in, I'm sure that people will not do this anytime soon. Group travel will cease to exist because of COVID. I think people would want to maintain social distancing. Leisure travel, shopping will also decrease to an extent. Domestic tourism will see boost compared to international. International, as every one of us knows that it's not, the aviation industry is still not started international. So I think somewhat it will impact domestic tourism, if not all. Destination weddings, school trips, etc. will also reduce. Air travel will become expensive because of obvious reasons. Hotels may become cheaper because they are running without any capacity. There will be an increase in road trips. Virtual experiences will prevail over physical. Relocation will increase demand for home rentals. And cleaning and contact-free technology will be the top priority in coming months. I think these are the pointers that I could think of for travel and tourism as a category, and which will certainly impact this business vertical in a big way. So, what should be the post-COVID marketing approach? I think we should stop face-to-face meetings, physical site visits, and conventional marketing channels like SMS, newspaper insertions, etc. We should continue increasing spends on digital, and mass marketing channels may continue to decline, and we should start contactless meetings and end-to-end digitization wherever possible. I think this is how the world will be post-COVID.
I had a question.
Sure.
Sir, since you said that most of your transactions are physical, that means majority of the customers are first of all seeing the property physically. So, I mean, what are your strategies? I mean, how are you thinking to do that something to satisfy customer online only? I mean, that would be saving your a lot of resources, time being one of the most important. So
sure. So the very obvious trend that I've seen right after COVID is, suddenly there's an influx of a lot of artificial intelligence and virtual, virtual tours companies, coming up in the market. Earlier, there were, hardly a couple of them which, reached out to me on LinkedIn for some sort of, 3D renderings for properties. But in the last 3 months, I think I've been contacted by more than 300 companies for the same. So the strategy is pretty simple. What we are going to do is, we basically tell the developer to make sure to come up with 3D renderings and 3D walkthroughs of their properties, so that when we try and sell them online, the customer can do a 3D virtual tour. On the click of a button, they basically can browse through the entire, apartment or the property, and with the help of drone tours, they can also have a look at the micro market without the need of, visiting the site.
And so one more thing, so what do you think is the mindset of the customer? Why he's not willing to? Why he's not being satisfied online, sir?
I think it's to do with the mindset. I think it's all about perception. I think it's a matter of time that it will eventually disappear. I mean, let's take an example, classic example of Amazon or e-commerce website wherein people were afraid to place mobile orders online. I mean, they were my friends who said that no, yeah, if I'm investing this kind of money, I would certainly want to go in person and buy the phone. But I think eventually it disappeared, right? It completely disappeared. Now what people do is they browse online, they run through customer reviews, they run through the sellers who are selling it online. They also make sure that they compare the pricing online and then they buy it. I think eventually, this shift was needed. I think it's a huge shift that has happened in the last 6 months. If one of the real estate players is doing this, I think it might not have changed the perception. But now, since most of the real estate companies have started doing this, I think it's a matter of time that everyone will start adapting to this. This will become a new normal. I think that's what I feel. It's a mindset game. It's a perception game, which will eventually change.
And sir, one last thing, sir, and there are challenges also, sir. I mean, if this would become a normal thing, then and don't you think, sir, the fraud cases will also be like at its peak, sir? Because virtual property, from the customer side, we don't believe that exists or not. I mean, this kind of.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question, Sandeep. So basically, you don't, or as a customer, we don't have to worry about, fraud transactions or fraud properties. After RERA has come into picture, RERA is a legal entity that basically monitors the real estate authorities of local regions. So Maharashtra has MahaRERA, Gurgaon, Haryana has Haryana RERA. Similarly, every location will have a different RERA. It's a, basically it looks after all the compliance issues. So any property coming up in any region these days will have to register themselves with RERA first. So because, and the reason why RERA came into picture is especially because there were a lot of fraudulent transactions happening. There were a lot of cases wherein developer used to take money from the customer but did not deliver the project on time or did not deliver at all. So I think considering all this step was taken 2 years back. Indian government came up with RERA, and after that, I think fraudulent transactions are almost nullified. There are no transactions. I mean, there are no issues with the developer or the delivery. I think as far as the project is RERA certified, you should not be worried. So as a potential customer, strong recommendation that you invest only in RERA certified properties.
Okay,
sir, one question. Sir, on the I'll ask. How have you seen that this COVID has mindset of a person? Like during last 3 months, from April to June, July, how do you think that the customer has react to this in this time? Has the sales remained constant or increase or decrease?
It's a very it's an open-ended question, and it's debatable. But to answer your point, I think when we started, when the COVID impacted us as a real estate industry, I think initially, yes, the first month everybody was thinking what will happen, and suddenly the numbers collapsed. But eventually, as the perception also changed to the customer, to the consumer, because all the businesses out there in the market, they started coming up with selling things online. Everybody adapted, be it grocery industry, be it your vegetables, or be it your e-commerce, or be it your haircuts, be it your home cleaning. So there were a lot of other verticals which are doing the same thing, which were doing the same thing. So as I mentioned, if one of the players in the market will take that step, nobody is going to believe them. But when the entire market was started, when they started doing this, I think there was a paradigm shift that happened in customers' mindset. That no, there's no other way, because people were not able to step up, right? People were not able to kind of do anything sitting at their homes, and they had no other option but to try things online, to choose things online, to order things online. So I think this perception or this mindset change has happened. Initially, there were a couple of hiccups in the initial 30 to 40 days, but then when it was a combined effort from all the industries, from all the verticals, I think it certainly helped change the mindset of the customer. So initially the numbers were hit, yeah, certainly, and I think at the same time companies were also planning to develop strategies to tackle how each and every company will basically come up with their own solutions to kind of tackle the blockers. They took their own sweet time of 30 to 45 days, or maybe there were companies who basically set up their infrastructure in 15 days as well. So as soon as I think everybody was ready, when the entire market was talking about the same thing, I think the perception changed. And now the perception has changed to such an extent that, post-COVID also, this is going to be the same. That's what I feel. So we've covered a lot of questions on the same slides, but if you think there's something else that we need to cover, please feel free to ask the questions. This is the time.
Sir, I just have one generic question, sir. Like, some people speculate that a good marketing guy should be having some seasoned marketing professional like you. What is your advice he aspirants on how he should choose marketing or not? Like, how can he know?
Kanan, I'm sorry, but you'll have to repeat your questions. You were breaking in.
So sorry, sir. Like, what would be your opinion on or advice to that to skills or what kind of?
Kanan, can you type your question in the chat box?
Actually, Pragna was going to ask the same question. Let Pragna take over.
Question.
Sure.
Yeah. So we have a lot of questions from our batch, and it would be really helpful if you could give some insights about those questions.
Sure.
The first question is from Kanan, actually, like he was listening to this. People normally speculate that a marketing professional must have good people skills, but must be good with customer empathy. So according to you, how can an MBA aspirant know that he is meant for marketing? Like he should choose marketing.
So people skills certainly is the most important skill. I mean, if I have to kind of prioritize, people skills is something that will take you a long way. See, as far as the expertise on marketing as a vertical is concerned, I think everybody can run through the digital tutorials. Everybody can run through the online tutorials, YouTube videos, and everybody can start configuring the campaigns. As I mentioned, you can it's very easy to configure campaigns or run a marketing campaign. I think what takes you the long way is the people skills. I think when you obviously I also started as an individual contributor, but then eventually I'm managing a team of 50 people now. It's very important to be to develop people skills, because without people skills you won't be able to manage teams. Now everybody who is is on the other side of the screen basically wants to become a leader someday, right? Nobody wants to be a contributor all the time. Initially, couple of months, couple of years, you will contribute on your own. Eventually, you will have 2 people team. Eventually, you will have 4 people team, and one day you will become head of your respective departments. So until and unless you have the skill set, people skills, people management skills, you won't be able to, go further you won't be able to grow further. So what I've been telling my teams is, certainly focus on the skill set that you are doing. I mean, if you are a digital marketer, make sure that you know anything and everything about digital. But if you can't become a good people manager, you won't be able to, become a head of a department. So it's very important. I would always prioritize people skills over, your vertical skills.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question, sir.
Yeah, sure.
May I go ahead?
Yeah, sure. Right. I will finish up the batch question later.
Okay, so sir, as you said that there is certainly an edge of digital marketing over traditional forms of marketing. So, what is the credibility of digital marketing? For example, you gave the example of millions of views over a post of certain branding of certain brand, when only a 3-second watch will count as a view, right? And but in contrast to the traditional forms of marketing, when we get a pamphlet of, for example, a ad in a newspaper page, we go through every detail or everything that is there to offer in that page, right? But in a video, for example, we only get a 3-second view, or for example, I'll give you everyone's habit. For example, in YouTube, we usually wait for the 5-second that skip ad button to appear, right? So how can you say that digital marketing definitely has a edge over traditional marketing?
So there are multiple ways to answer that question, Priyanshu. So, first of all, I think when you talk about skip ads, I think there is an inventory available wherein it's an unskippable ad. I mean, you can't skip it at all. I mean, 8 seconds, 7 seconds, you cannot skip that ad. A customer will have to mandatory watch the video before you can move the next screen. There's a lot of disturbance coming in from, I think, in the background. Can somebody put it on mute? Yeah, it's much better now. Yeah, so there are a lot of unskippable inventories available, which can basically make sure that the customer is watching the full content before you skip the content. Secondly, the legitimacy of the views. To an extent, I agree. I mean, as a marketer, you should not just look at 10 million views and be happy about it. You also need to go back and look at the other metrics like average time spent by the customer on the post. You should also need to look at the engagement rate of the post. You should also need to look at the number of genuine inquiries that have come through that particular post. So looking at 10 million views should not make you happy. As an efficient marketer, you should also deep dive and figure out other KPIs of the campaign to make sure that the users or the views that you've got are genuine ones. So, there are a lot of other things that you can deep dive and figure out. And as an efficient marketer, you should, to make sure that what you've gone is, what you have run as a campaign has genuine customers and not bots.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I'd like to take a question from the batch.
Sure.
Could you please highlight some strategies for online reputation management? You mentioned that in the lecture. Is it a digital marketing strategy? This was the question.
Yes. It's a very much digital marketing strategy. So online reputation management. Let me be honest. I mean, a lot of companies out there are still not focusing on ORM or online reputation management. I think it's very important to, it will give you a reality check, as in if you put in a customer or a company's name or an organization's name and, start looking for negative reviews out there. It's a great habit. I think every organization should do it, because if you want to acquire genuine customers, any genuine customer who is basically transacting with you first will make sure that they will search for you online. before the customer does, I think as an organization, the marketer should do. That will give them a lot of reality check as in what is going wrong with the brand, where are we falling short, what is that, what issues are basically, basically impacting the workflow of existing employees as well as, outsider. I mean, a negative review can come from an existing employee, or it can also come from a potential customer. So it will give you visibility on both. And the primary means of figuring this out is Google. You can just go there, put the organization's names, and try and look at the review. It will give you a lot of insights. If you want to have a look at what employees are talking about you can visit Glassdoor. Glassdoor basically talks about all the company reviews, and it will give you a lot of insights on what your employees are thinking about you. That also falls under online reputation management. So as I mentioned, it will give you a reality check. There are different ways that you can actually keep a tab on this. I think the first we'll talk about lowest hanging fruits, which is basically your recently acquired customers. I think every marketer should make sure that once the customer has purchased an item from you or product from you, make sure that there's a link to get the reviews also. When the customer is happy, there is 100% chances that he will leave a positive review about you. Otherwise, if you go to them and if you reach out to them after a couple of hours, they will not be able to do it, and they will not do it. It's in the spur of a moment when they are happy, it's the best time to capture the positive review. Yes, if you talk about negative review, वो कभी भी दे देगा. They are always ready to give negative reviews. Okay, but if you talk about positive, the timing has to be very apt. So make sure that all your customers who are happy customers leave positive reviews. This can be on Facebook, this can be on Google reviews, this can be on your website, this can be anywhere. And it's a good trust factor for a person to or a potential customer before they invest in your company. I mean, if I go to a website, so when we do lead generation campaigns, we try and highlight positive customer testimonials on that particular campaign so that the customer knows, okay, so somebody has bought from them and they are happy about it. And similarly, we also try and highlight Google review ratings. As in, to give you an example, I think Dubai rating is close to 4.5 star, and then we also highlight the number of reviews, to give you an example. So that basically helps a lot to the end customer. What are the ways that you can tackle it? So obviously, Google does not allow you to delete negative reviews from Google. I mean, if you reach out to them, they will simply say no, that this is a genuine sentiment by the user and you should work on it so that these negative reviews stop. In that case, you need to come up with multiple marketing strategies. So one way is to push more and more positive reviews, positive testimonials from your customers so that the negative reviews goes to the next page. I mean, they say that, hide dead body on the second page of Google and nobody will find it. That's where we, try and push the negative reviews. So whatever that happens or appears in the first page is what the customers will believe. So try and push as much, positive content, as much genuine testimonials as possible. Try and do a lot of genuine press releases so that, if somebody is searching for you, that press release pops up in the searches, or maybe positive reviews pops up in the searches. So there are different ways of doing it when it comes to online reputation management. There are a lot of agencies out there. Meltwater is one of the biggest agencies who can help you with online reputation management. They are expert in this matter. And there are a lot of smaller other companies who are also available, and they will give you a guarantee that, okay, if you work with us, we'll basically work on this and we'll make sure that the negative reviews will disappear. So there's no such trick like making the review disappear. If somebody tells you that we'll be able to delete reviews from Google, that's absolutely, it's not possible. Google will not delete the reviews unless you take them in the court of law. And that too has to be, justified by a proper reasoning. Otherwise, they will not review. They will not delete it. Does that help, or any other specific question around the wire?
No, so we are done with our queries. If people would like to ask some questions, you can ask the questions.
Yeah, sure. Feel free to.
I wanted to ask a question.
Sure.
Sir, you have worked in various sectors like in FMCG, in real estate, and also in other sectors. So, which one was the most challenging one?
Uh, so I think see, sector as a vertical, I would say that real estate is a bit challenging vertical because primarily because of the, again coming back to the piece of marketing, the pricing in real estate is pretty high. Something that you sell online worth let's say 100 rupees, it could be an impulsive buy. I might buy it even if it's not needed, right? Because the ticket size is not high. But if you talk about real estate, it's a very thought through decision. You cannot make an impulse buy on real estate. So it's very difficult, and it's very critical to find the right audience to who will invest in real estate. As far as the marketing strategies are concerned, yes, real estate is the most challenging vertical. But as far as when I had faced the most challenges was the gaming vertical when I worked with Jungly Games, because I think it's about the perception in India. I think a lot of people, including our families, they don't like their children pumping in money on paid games, right? That's the mindset that we have. Especially in mobile games. I mean, if you are, I'm sure that everybody of you would have played Clash of Clans, to give you an example. But you always play the free version, right? You never play the paid version. You never buy gems or you never buy points. So that mindset is still there. That was the biggest challenge for me as a marketer in Jungly Games. And I think that has still not changed. It will take some time before the overall perception changes in India. But apart from India, I think international markets, everybody is adapted quite well. The gaming industry, I think, as far as I know, it's even in US and European markets, I think it's even bigger than the Hollywood and Bollywood industry combined. There are a lot of monetization which is happening on gaming front, including the PlayStation consoles and mobile gaming and all sort of gaming.
Yes, sir.
So I think
Thank you, sir, for. Sure,
Yeah.
Sita, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry, I interrupted you. So actually, I think we're done with your questions and we have already extended our time. We are really grateful for you that you allowed us this experience. And thank you, sir, for willing to share your valuable time and expertise in the field of marketing, explaining 7 P's of marketing, post-COVID strategy, relating with your experience, real-life examples, and making it so simple for us to understand. Also, this session was completely an interactive session, and we bombarded you with a lot of questions. And thank you for addressing them all. It was really helpful, and the takeaways from the sessions were really insightful. I'm sure this excellent interactive session will stay with us for the time to come. Thank you once again, sir, on behalf of Department of Management Studies, IIT Roorkee.
Sure. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. I think it was a great session, I would say. Of all the sessions that I've done, the audience was pretty engaging. And I think, that's what it is. I think me just speaking from one end and, no inputs from the other end does not make sense. I would always want my, sessions to be engaging. I think that makes it more interactive and the audience basically, that the audience is live and engaging. So had a great time. And even after, the end of the session, if any of you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can email me or you can WhatsApp me on this number. If you want, I can even share this slide for you guys. I think this is I made this specifically for you for today's session. So thanks for the wonderful audience. I think it was a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the pleasure.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.